Good morning and welcome to a very special virtual assembly. This is the first virtual assembly that we're doing, but we're doing it because today is a very important historic day. Today is known as VE Day, or Victory in Europe Day, because 75 years ago today, the Second World War ended. And whilst it's a time to celebrate because it brings to an end a period of history that wasn't nice and millions of people died, it's also quite a sad time and a time to be able to reflect on those millions of people that did lose their lives. So here to tell us more about what happened 75 years ago today are our staff from Beacon Hill Academy.
On the 8th of May 1945, VE, Victory in Europe Day, was one that remained in the memory of all those that had witnessed it. It meant an end to nearly 6 years of a war that had cost the lives of millions. It had destroyed families, cities and homes, and had brought huge suffering to the populations of entire countries.
Millions of people rejoiced in the news that Germany had surrendered, relieved that the intense strain of total war was finally over.
In towns and cities across the country, people marked the victory with street parties, dancing and singing. But this was not an end to the conflict, nor was it an end to the impact war had on people.
The war against Japan did not end until August 1945, and the political, social and economic repercussions of the Second World War were felt long after Germany and Japan surrendered.
With Berlin surrounded, Adolf Hitler committed suicide on 30th of April 1945. His named successor, Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, negotiated an end to the war with the Allies while seeking to save as many Germans as possible from falling into Russian hands.
A German delegation arrived at the headquarters of British Field Marshal, where they accepted the unconditional surrender of Germany. The unconditional surrender was accepted by General Eisenhower.
The news of Germany's surrender was not surprising. It had been anticipated for some time, and people across Britain were on standby to start celebrating the end of the war.
The announcement that the war had ended in Europe was broadcast to the British people by the radio late in the day on the 7th of May.
The BBC interrupted its scheduled programming with the news flash announcing that Victory in Europe Day would be a national holiday to take place the following day.
Newspapers ran the headlines as soon as they could, and special editions were printed to carry the long-awaited announcement. News that the war was ending in Europe spread like wildfire across the world.
Many people in Britain didn't wait for the official day of celebration and began the festivities as soon as they heard the news on May the 7th.
After years of wartime restrictions, from food and clothing rationing to blackouts and bombing raids, it was understandable how eager they were to finally let loose and enjoy themselves.
Colourful bunting and flags soon lined the streets of villages, towns and cities across Britain. On the eve of VE Day, bonfires were lit, people danced and the pubs were full of revellers.
A national holiday was declared on the 8th of May 1945. In the morning, Prime Minister Winston Churchill had gained assurances from the Ministry of Food that there were enough beer supplies in the capital. There were even some commemorative items that were very hastily made, including some VE Day mugs.
Various events were organised to mark the occasion, including parties, Thanksgiving services and street parties. Communities came together to share the moment.
London's St Paul's Cathedral held 10 consecutive services giving thanks for peace, each one attended by thousands of people.
Winston Churchill was a man of the hour on VE Day. Britain's Prime Minister had been a major driving force in the victory against Nazi Germany. And now that peace had come, the British public were keen to celebrate with him.
At 3 p.m. on VE Day, Churchill made a national radio broadcast. In it, he announced the welcome news that the war had ended in Europe, but he concluded with a note of caution, saying, "We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing, but let us not forget for a moment the toil and efforts that lie ahead."
The British royal family also played a central role in London's victory celebrations. Huge numbers of people surged down the mount to Buckingham Palace, where King George VI, Queen Elizabeth and their daughters Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret soon appeared on the balcony to wave to the cheering crowds.
In total, the King and Queen made 8 appearances on the balcony and were once joined by Winston Churchill.
While the King and Queen were waving to the crowds for the last time that evening, their daughters were secretly mingling with the people below.
The future monarch, Princess Elizabeth, and her sister Margaret had been allowed out of the palace to take part anonymously in the party-like atmosphere.
Princess Elizabeth later recalled, "We stood outside and shouted, 'We want the King!' It was one of the most memorable nights of my life."
The VE Day celebrations continued well into the night. The largest crowds in Britain were in the capital, but people all around the country took part in the parties, singing, dancing. Many bonfires and fireworks were lit to mark the occasion.
An estimated 50,000 people crowded around Piccadilly Circus. The joy of the day was broken down by normal social conventions. People spoke to and embraced those whom they'd never met before.
Music was provided by the gramophones, accordions, barrel organs, and revellers sang and danced the popular tunes of the day.
Licensing hours were extended so that people could toast the end of the war with a drink or two. Cheers. And dance halls stayed open until midnight.
Not everyone celebrated VE Day. For those who had lost loved ones in the conflict, it was a time to reflect. Amidst the street parties and rejoicing, many people mourned the death of a friend or relative, or worried about those still serving overseas.
For many of the widows the war had produced, the noise and the jubilation as people celebrated VE Day was too much to bear and not something that they could take part in.
Thank you for watching our virtual assembly on the VE celebrations, and do stay tuned because throughout today there's going to be a whole series of other events that we'll be doing to mark and celebrate the VE celebrations. So at 11 o'clock we've got the 2-minute silence, followed by the last post that will be played by one of our students from Beacon Hill Academy, Adam Brownhill. At 3 o'clock we'll be joining the country for our national toast and a sing-along, and later on in the evening at 6 o'clock we'll be joined by someone that was around that celebrated the VE celebrations, and we'll be hearing from Thelma Cox about her experience of living through the war. So stay tuned and have a great day. Enjoy those celebrations that will be going on.